again, where that cut line is drawn, I don't think it's definitive because that one position group thing that we talked about at the beginning becomes an issue for everybody. It's not just the Penn States or the Ole Misses that we don't traditionally think of as being as deep as these other teams. Everybody's susceptible to it if they have the wrong position group, have bad injury luck.
If I gave you two stones, one black, one white, like this is like we're like John Locke and Lost over here, and I had in one hand I have this one stone is Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas,
and
the other stone is the field.
Yep.
Which one will you be more comfortable
Ohio
taking?
State, Georgia, and Texas.
Exactly.
No question. Well,
and that's just kind of.
Actually, I take that back because you've given me Alabama.
I have.
And
I'm giving you Alabama and Oregon.
I get Alabama, Oregon, Ole Miss, Penn State, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, LSU.
One black, one white.
Florida State,
you're a man
Clemson.
of faith or you're a man of science? Because right now I'm saying I'm a man of science, and I'm taking that one stone.
But I'm not sure I'm being a man of faith. The longer I go, or I get more. If you're giving me that field, especially if you're giving me Alabama, because Alabama,
and I purposely included out, and because Alabama is, and I noted this in my very column. I mean, I think Alabama is the exact sort of team Kirby Smart was kind of referencing, his own team obviously as well, because they lost a game a year ago and missed the playoff. But yeah, I mean, you could totally foresee a 9-3 Alabama stumbling a couple times, early in the Kalen DeBoer era, yet finding their footing late. And then, that roster is going to be, especially, in this post portal spring window. It's an interesting question. I tossed you a bone there, including Alabama. If I was being really a man of science, I would probably take those four teams. I would include Alabama in my stone and then give you everybody else. So that would be Oregon, Missouri, Ole Miss, or whatever. But I think it's an interesting debate because I think it's a shorter list than maybe you do right now. And we'll see. That's what's going to be awesome to see.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. So having Alabama in the field just feels weird to me. Not being in that one special group, but it makes sense. Like if you go to FanDuel and look at the win totals, Alabama's actually not in that group necessarily. They're in the Ole Miss, that group. So, because Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, and Oregon are the 10.5 win total teams. They're the highest win total teams on FanDuel right now. So I like the way you constructed that exercise because it's one of those like, you saw, I'll definitely take the special group. And then I'm like, wait a second. I might take the field.
Man of faith.
I don't think I'm being that faithful. I think I've got some empirical evidence behind me with that Alabama roster. I also think that the Ole Miss roster, like the Florida State roster, is a very interesting question this year. We don't know what Florida State's going to be. We assume they're going to be pretty good because they've gotten better every year under Mike Norvell. But what Florida State represents is something entirely different in this new era, this particular year. Because who did Florida State pillage in the transfer portal this time? It wasn't South Carolina, who they usually have been pillaging. It was Alabama and Georgia. It was the guys that were going to compete for jobs this spring, but were not guaranteed to win them. And they are now at Florida State, and they're going to be Florida State starters. Like, that is really interesting because they are the ones who plucked off the very depth that would have made Georgia and Alabama nearly invincible. But what if those players together are good enough to beat those teams?
Yeah, I think Florida State's going to qualify for the very good but not great team this season. Look at the guys. I think the other side of that coin would be look who they're replacing. They're replacing guys that are, who are not competing for jobs, who are now going to the NFL.
where they're
So
going to get jobs in the NFL.
Yeah, you're replacing Jared Verse and Keon Coleman, and those guys. I mean, we'll see what happens with DJU at quarterback. You're replacing a guy. Jordan Travis isn't going to be an NFL quarterback, but his development over the last 3 seasons has been as impressive as really anybody in the country. So,
all right, so let's add to our list. We've got 5 teams right now that we feel very comfortable having on our list of they are deep enough to win the national title. You may cut your list off at 5, Jesse. That may be where you stop. I will add Ole Miss because I look at the way they've worked in the transfer. Their top end talent can certainly compete with everybody. Whether they have the depth to compete in this situation is the question. But again, I question everybody's depth right now. So I'll throw Ole Miss in that mix. I will throw Michigan back in that mix. And we don't know anything about whether Michigan can be a national title team this year, other than they're going to have good players on both lines of scrimmage. And that's kind of good enough for me. We need to see what they're going to do at quarterback. That may not be answered till after spring practice, till the spring portal window. But I do think Michigan is capable. I will throw Penn State in that mix. I think now they've got to build a more dynamic offense. That's up to Andy Kotelnicki and company. The defense is going to be good enough to compete with anybody. I'm good with Penn State being on that list. So I'm now up to 8.
I would push back on Michigan personally. In terms of returning production, they're, I think, second worst in the country, and they don't have, or among all power conference teams, and they don't have, kind of the foundational talent on the roster like Alabama, which also is replacing a bunch. Sharon Moore,
Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham are the foundational talent. And if you don't believe me, try to lift them. It would be like trying to lift the foundation of a house.
They are one side of the coin there, though. That offensive line, you're replacing 7 guys, and that's a lot. It's just, frankly, I think right now Sharon Moore is kind of playing with house money a little bit because of the success the program had a year ago, and obviously Ohio State's going all in. I think Michigan's still going to be a quality team, but I'm not sure they have lost. You're about to send 18 guys to the NFL, 18 guys who were invited to the combine, an NFL record. I think probably Penn State has more on the roster right now, and just in terms of depth. I think one team that was not on your list that, again, you kind of brought up at the beginning, we're just kind of an LSU fit in there, because they do have the foundational talent,
elite offensive tackles, right? There's always talent on the roster. Now they have to be better defensively,
right?
Shockingly, they've been terrible in the secondary, which doesn't make any sense, where LSU's always had talent there. So but that may be one where they can build it back up pretty quickly. Oklahoma and Texas A&M, we talked about, they're probably not ready yet to do it this season.
Notre Dame on your list?
That's the question. I don't know if Notre Dame's on my list. Playoff. I need to see a year of them having some dynamic pass catchers where they have, I want to see Notre Dame go into a full regular season where every game there's somebody who scares you in the passing game. It hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened in a long time.
Same thing for Penn State, right?
Exactly. That's also the problem. Penn State's defense is going to be so good, though, that it's if it happens for Penn State, if that offense happens, that defense can carry them.
I mean, I love the move of Carter to defensive end. I think that's going to be.
Oh yeah, and Tom Allen is a great defensive coach. Tom Allen is a fantastic DC. I know it didn't work out at Indiana. Guess what? It doesn't usually work out for the Indiana head coach. I think he'll be fantastic in that job. All right, let's talk about the ACC and the Big 12, because we've only mentioned SEC and Big 10 teams so far. The supposition is that the national champ will come from one of those 2 leagues. Perfectly understandable. I think the ACC and the Big 12 are different in this respect, because in the ACC, I do think Florida State and Clemson can do this. They can be deep enough. I worry about Clemson for the same reason you do. I don't think their roster is as efficiently built as everybody else's because Dabo doesn't use the transfer portal. Florida State is a more efficient roster. It may not have as much top-end talent that you signed out of high school, but they probably have a more functionally talented roster because they've been evaluating as they go and changing pieces as they go.
Yeah, I mean, I think they at least have a shot. I don't think the Big 12, you can make a case of not can they win it, when's the first time they may even make it to the national championship game. Because when you're talking about roster recruiting, talent acquisition, those rosters just don't have that makeup. None of those teams in the newly formed Big 12 even recruit annually at a top 25 level. And so it's going to be very difficult. You could have an Oklahoma State or a Kansas State that maybe, spurs an upset. But can they do that 3 times? That I don't foresee. So Clemson, Florida State, they at least have the base there that if, the cards come up correct, that perhaps they could, basically hit the river or get a full house. I don't see it for any team in the Big 12, right now at least.
Yeah, and you would need an ultra special quarterback. The potential for an ultra special the best quarterbacks in the Big 12, if you think about it, I think, established ones, you got Shedeur Sanders, which they're not going to have the line of scrimmage players to even come close. I don't think they're going to be able to compete for I don't think they'll be able to. Colorado will be able to compete for the Big 12 title even. Cam Rising in Utah will. You've also got Nova Fifita back at Arizona, a new coaching staff with Brent Brennan, but they still bring back a lot of players. But that's another one that I wouldn't necessarily be able to put as somebody who could compete game in, game out with the superpowers we were talking about. I think Avery Johnson at Kansas State has the potential to be the most special of those quarterbacks when all is said and done, but I'm not sure that's the talents around him to do that. It's hard.
It's the body blow theory, Andy. It's just that there's only you're only going to have so many dudes at the end of this, and so when you haven't been recruiting at a comparable level to the not even the Ohio States and Georgias, but to the Missouris, Kentuckys, and South Carolinas, it's just going to be very difficult for those programs to withstand that many games. When you're adding the totals, you line it up and you're having
withstand is a mix of withstand and sustain. I like that word. That's fantastic. Okay, you just mentioned Missouri, Missouri and Tennessee. So those two are kind of like high expectation. If they exceed expectations even slightly, we're talking about probably playoff teams. Do you feel like they could do this?
They are in my my cookie jar of very good, but probably not great. I think that's where I kind of land on those teams, and I frankly have Ole Miss in that category as well. We'll see. Lane has certainly assembled a hell of a 2 deep there. What's behind those guys, TBD. But I would have all 3 of those SEC teams as absolutely could see them making the dance. Don't see them winning it.
Yeah, that's the part I try to figure out, because again, I go back to what I said earlier about any team in the SEC or any team in the Big 10 that can win 10 games or can win 11 games, I feel like has a possibility to do this, because we may have just misjudged the talent on the roster. Tennessee, I saw them last week, super deep on the defensive line, deeper in the secondary than we thought they were going to be, deeper receiver than we probably thought they were going to be. They need some injury luck on the offensive line. They need to stay healthy on the offensive line to be as good as they can be. But I feel like that's a team that can play with anybody if Nico is as good as we think he's going to be.
Yeah, and I, if you're gonna make the argument for the Vols, you would say, hey, if Nico's transcendent, and then you have James Pierce on the other side, maybe perhaps the best individual defensive player in the SEC in 2024. Is that the formula? Can you survive enough, like you said, on the offensive line? I like that receiver room. You get Brew back, you get the nice transfer from Tulane, Squirrel White. There are at least some elements there that if you wanted to make the case, I could hear it. You could lay it out. But I would have them in the cookie jar. Very good, probably not great. And you're obviously, for a lot of these guys, for a lot of these teams, frankly, you're having to bet on what are you going to get from the quarterback position, because that is so important. Nico, the ability, the raw talent, obviously there. It's just about now we just have to actually see, the production and the development on the field.
Yeah, I keep going back to your one hand, two hand question. The field
It's a good one,
versus
and
the
you know what?
fearsome foursome.
It'll be fun to kind of the update or kind of see how by October where are we feeling? By November, does the weight change? Is one hand looking stronger than the other? It'll be fun to kind of update. The man of science, man of faith, or black and white, however you want to put it, of those two camps. I think.
Well, one thing I love is that you got that group of four. All four of those, like regular season matchups in conference for
Right.
all those teams. Like Ohio State's going to Oregon, Georgia's going to Texas. Like we're going to see them play, and we're going to have an idea based on those games where everybody fits. And yeah, God bless you if you're trying to get a hotel room in Austin the weekend of the Texas Georgia game, which also is the weekend of the F1 race.
I was going to say there's an F1 dance happening at the same time, I believe.
So Parker in the chat, I don't think people realize what potential Oklahoma has. They're recruiting better than they have in 15 years. 3 to 4 years from now, they're lethal. Well, I think that's the thing. That we don't think they're there yet. I don't think anybody's saying that Oklahoma's never going. Well, I do think there are people saying, oh, Oklahoma's never going to be able to compete in the SEC. Those people don't know their history, have not followed how any of this works. Oklahoma will be competitive in the SEC. We're just not sure they're going to be super competitive right now, right off the bat in the SEC, but we could be wrong. They beat Texas last year. If they can beat Texas this year, they could be a playoff team.
And if you think Oklahoma's good, you need to go to FanDuel right now and lay some wood.
Hammer that over.
I think that over under win total, I think, is like 7.5. So
it is.
If you're in that camp, you have a prime opportunity to put your money where your mouth is, because there does seem to be some skepticism about Oklahoma in 2024. Look at Oklahoma's history. They've basically been a recession-proof program for almost 40 years, outside of a small blip there in the early 90s.
80 years.
80 years. There you go. Well,
going back to Bud Wilkinson.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's way before my time, Andy. But yes, they have been a consistent winner. So betting against the Sooners would probably be a bad idea.
Yeah, I think they're going to be fine, but I don't think they're going to be dominant right off the bat. But a lot of that has to do with, it's interesting because a lot of that has to do with how I feel about Texas, or I think Texas is in a better place right now, more ready to compete for the national title right now. That said, they did play last year and Oklahoma won. So, it's not that big of a distinction. So, Jesse, I cannot wait for this. I'm so excited. Every time we talk about this stuff, I get more excited, because this national title race, like, I don't feel like we're going to be saying at the end of October, oh, these are the only 3 teams that are left. These are the only 3 teams we're worried about right now.
Well, that's what's going to be fun to play out. But again, it's funny because enjoy the journey along the way, right? I mean, like the 12-team playoff, maybe it is only hope in a form of representation. but the Tennessees, the Florida States, the Clemsons, the Notre Dames, they can at least, dream, and maybe it only is a dream. We'll see how it plays out. I think the list is going to be fairly short, but we're also going to need several years of data to actually fundamentally answer this question. So it was a fun exercise. We'll kind of see how it all unfolds, and I'm excited to chat it up with you. As this season as this off season continues and as we get closer to the actual season.
Yeah, it's great. And I like discussions like this because it helps us kind of digest what is coming. Because I still think, I don't know about you, Jesse, I think there are going to be a lot of people who get to August, get to September, and it's just going to slap them in the face that this is a completely different sport this year. Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.